It was July 2nd, 1937. The sky above the Pacific shimmered like glass. Somewhere between Lae, New Guinea, and a tiny island called Howland, a silver Lockheed Electra sliced through the air, carrying the world's most famous woman pilot, Amelia Earhart, and her navigator, Fred Noonan. They were chasing a dream to circle the globe along the equator. But that morning, the radio went silent. The sky swallowed their voices, and neither Amelia nor her plane was ever seen again. For decades, people have asked the same question. What really happened to Amelia Earhart? Did her plane crash into the ocean? Was she captured by the Japanese? Or did she survive, living under a new name, hidden from the world? To understand her disappearance, we must first understand her, the woman who dared to touch the sky when women were told to stay grounded. Amelia Mary Earhart was born in 1897 in Atchison, Kansas. From the start, she was different. While other girls played with dolls, Amelia climbed trees, built homemade sleds, and shot rats with a .22 rifle. She once wrote, "I never liked the idea that girls couldn't do the things boys could." Her family life was complicated. Her father struggled with alcoholism, her mother was distant, and money was often short. Yet in that chaos, Amelia found her escape in something vast and endless: the open sky. It was December 28, 1920, when Amelia's life changed forever. She paid $10 for a short flight with pilot Frank Hawks at a small airfield in Long Beach, California. The moment the plane lifted off the ground, she said later, "I knew I had to fly." That 30-second flight ignited something inside her that would never fade. Soon she began taking flying lessons, working odd jobs to pay for fuel and instruction. Her first plane was a bright yellow Kinner Airster, which she nicknamed the Canary. With it, she set her first altitude record, climbing to 14,000 feet, the highest any woman had ever flown. But Amelia's fame truly began in 1928, when she became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, though not as a pilot. She was invited by publisher George Putnam, who saw in her a symbol, not just a woman pilot, but a modern hero. She later said, "I was just baggage like a sack of potatoes, because I didn't actually fly the plane." Yet that flight changed everything. Overnight, she became an American icon, the Queen of the Air. Still, Amelia wanted more than fame. She wanted flight itself. In 1932, she took off alone from Newfoundland in a red Lockheed Vega and crossed the Atlantic solo, battling icy winds, mechanical failures, and exhaustion. She landed in a field in Ireland after 15 hours of flight. When a farmer approached her and asked, "Have you flown far?" she simply said, "From America." That moment sealed her place in history. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, and one of the most admired figures in the world. But fame didn't blind her. She used her influence to fight for women's rights, encouraging others to step beyond the limits society placed on them. She once told a group of students, "Never interrupt someone doing what you said couldn't be done." By 1936, Amelia was already planning her next great adventure, a flight around the world. It had never been done before by a woman, and only a handful of men had even attempted it. Her plane, the Lockheed Electra 10E, was custom-built for the journey. Sleek, fast, and silver, it was designed to be the ultimate flying machine. She assembled a small crew, including her trusted navigator, Fred Noonan, a skilled seaman with a mind for maps and stars. Their route would take them 29,000 miles across the globe, following the equator, through jungles, deserts, and oceans. It was the ultimate test of endurance, precision, and courage. Their first attempt in March 1937 ended abruptly. The plane crashed during takeoff in Hawaii. The Electra was badly damaged. Some said the failure shook Amelia's confidence. Others said it only made her more determined. 3 months later, she tried again. This time they would fly east, starting from Oakland, across South America, Africa, India, and the Pacific. By late June, they had completed 22,000 miles, with just one last stretch remaining, the Pacific crossing from New Guinea to Howland Island. Howland was a tiny speck in the ocean, only 2 miles long, flat as a table, surrounded by endless blue. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed nearby, ready to guide Amelia in by radio. At 10 a.m. on July 2nd, she took off from Leh. The weather was calm, but clouds loomed over the horizon. For the next 20 hours, radio operators caught fragments of her voice, sometimes clear, sometimes faint, as if the ocean itself was swallowing her words. At 8:43 a.m., her last transmission came through. "We are on the line 157337. We will repeat this message. We are running north and south." Then, silence. The Itasca called back again and again, but no response came. The U.S. Navy launched one of the largest search operations in history, covering 250,000 square miles of ocean. Not a single trace of the plane was found. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had vanished. The world was left stunned. How could one of the most famous women on Earth simply disappear? Some said she ran out of fuel and crashed into the sea. Others believed she landed on a deserted island and lived for days, maybe weeks. And then there were the darker whispers, that she was captured by the Japanese or working secretly for the U.S. government. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. The mystery of Amelia Earhart was only beginning.
The moment Amelia's last words echoed through the radio, "We are on the line 157337, panic set in. On board the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, operators stared at the static-filled radio. The voice that had been so confident, so steady, was now gone. The sky was empty, and the ocean below, endless. Within hours, the news reached Washington. The U.S. Navy launched what was then the largest search operation in peacetime history. 4 ships, 66 aircraft, and thousands of men were deployed to scour the Pacific. But how do you find something that small in a world that vast? Howland Island, their destination, was just a pinprick on the map, surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. Even with perfect navigation, finding it was like trying to land on a grain of sand in the middle of the sea. And on that day, the weather was far from perfect. Storm clouds gathered, radio signals weakened. Fred Noonan's celestial navigation, based on stars, became impossible in the overcast sky. Still, the searchers refused to give up. Planes flew grid patterns over the ocean, dipping low, their pilots scanning for anything, a shimmer of metal, an oil slick, a floating body. They dropped flares, dye markers, even messages in bottles. Days turned into weeks, and yet the ocean stayed silent. No trace, no wreckage, no answers. Families back home clung to hope. Newspapers printed headlines like "Earhart Found Alive" or "Secret Island Refuge." Rumors spread faster than facts. Some said she'd been rescued by a passing ship. Others claimed she'd crash-landed and was living among islanders. But deep down, the world began to understand the truth. Amelia Earhart was gone. Still, there were strange clues. Radio operators across the Pacific reported hearing faint distress calls on Earhart's frequency, a woman's voice repeating coordinates, pleading for help. One operator on Nauru Island swore he heard her voice say, "Can you hear me? This is Amelia Earhart. Please come in." Another in Florida claimed to have heard similar signals bouncing off the ionosphere. Were these real transmissions or the desperate hopes of people who refused to let go? No one knew. Yet, the reports were detailed enough that the Navy redirected parts of the search toward the Phoenix Islands, a remote chain south of Howland. One of them was called Gardner Island, now known as Nikumororo. It was uninhabited, surrounded by a coral reef, and often visited only by seabirds. On July 9th, a Navy plane flew over it. From above, the crew saw something strange, what looked like signs of recent human activity. But the island was quiet, and no one signaled for help. The plane turned away, continuing its mission. Years later, that same island would become the heart of one of the most compelling theories about what happened to Amelia Earhart. But in 1937, the official conclusion came quickly. After 16 days, the Navy called off the search. The government declared Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan lost at sea. The world mourned. George Putnam, Amelia's husband, never gave up. He organized private searches, combed through islands, hired local sailors, even consulted psychics, anything to find her. But all he found was silence. As months passed, people began to ask, could someone as skilled as Amelia, someone who had crossed the Atlantic and defied every limit, simply vanish without a trace? It didn't make sense. That's when the theories began. Some believed the simplest explanation. She ran out of fuel, crashed into the sea, and sank. Others believed something darker, that she'd been captured by the Japanese, accused of spying, and executed. And then there were whispers that she'd lived on, under a new name, in America itself. Each theory had pieces of truth and pieces of mystery. In the years that followed, small fragments began to appear. A piece of metal was found on a Pacific island, a woman's shoe that matched Amelia's size, bones buried in coral sand, and photos that some claimed showed her, alive, long after she was declared dead. Every clue pulled the world deeper into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Amelia Earhart wasn't just a pilot. She was a symbol of courage, of freedom, of what it means to chase the impossible. And maybe that's why her story refuses to die. Because somewhere between truth and legend, her spirit still flies.
Even after the search ended, the Pacific Ocean kept its secrets. The world was left with more questions than answers. Some people accepted the simple truth. She had run out of fuel and vanished into the vast blue. But others could not let go. One of the most persistent theories suggested that Amelia and Fred had survived the crash, only to be captured by the Japanese. In 1937, Japan controlled several Pacific islands. The theory goes that Amelia's plane may have strayed off course, landing or crashing on one of these islands. Eyewitnesses decades later claimed to have seen a tall woman with a distinct hairstyle alongside a man matching Noonan's description. Some recalled that she was treated politely at first, then disappeared. Official records were murky, and no government ever confirmed the story, but the accounts were consistent enough to keep the theory alive. Another, more tantalizing theory centers on Nikumororo Island, part of the remote Phoenix group. In 1940,
a British colonial officer found mysterious human remains, along with a woman's shoe and a makeshift campsite. The skeleton, though incomplete, belonged to a woman of Amelia's proximate size. Decades later, modern forensic experts analyzed these remains. While DNA testing was inconclusive, the measurements fit Amelia's height and bone structure more closely than any other woman of the time. Could Amelia have landed there? Could she have survived for days, perhaps weeks, alone on the coral-strewn island? There are stories from islanders about strange footprints and campfires seen in the years after her disappearance. Some suggest she adapted to island life, waiting in vain for a rescue that never came. Then there's the more controversial idea that Amelia returned home under a new identity. Some claim she lived as Irene Bolam, a woman in New Jersey, decades after 1937. Facial recognition enthusiasts and researchers studied photographs. They argued the similarities were too strong to ignore. But Irene Bolam herself denied it publicly. And yet, the speculation continues. Even recently, researchers analyzing a 1937 photograph from the U.S. National Archives suggested it might show Amelia and Fred alive in the Marshall Islands. It sparked headlines around the world, but careful examination revealed the photograph was likely taken before the flight, adding more layers of mystery than clarity. Science has tried to help. Deep-sea sonar scans near Howland Island have located debris that could be consistent with a Lockheed Electra. Oceanographers and adventurers have studied currents, drift patterns, and possible crash sites. Each new discovery raises possibilities, but never delivers proof. What is certain is this: Amelia Earhart's disappearance is a story of courage, mystery, and endurance. A woman who defied limits, who reached heights that others thought impossible, continues to inspire generations. Her life and the enigma of her final flight remind us that some stories are bigger than facts. Some mysteries cannot be solved by maps, radio signals, or government reports. They exist to challenge our imagination and inspire our dreams. Somewhere between reality and legend, between the ocean and the sky, Amelia Earhart still flies.
Decades passed. The world moved on, but Amelia Earhart's story refused to fade. New generations grew up hearing her name, her daring flights, and the unsolved mystery that still haunted the Pacific. In the 1990s and 2000s, modern researchers began revisiting the old evidence with new technology. High-resolution satellite images revealed patterns on remote islands, suggesting possible plane wreckage. Diving expeditions used sonar to scan the seabed near Howland Island and the Phoenix Group. Pieces of metal, fragments resembling the Lockheed Electra, and even reports of aircraft parts washing ashore revived hope and controversy. One of the most compelling modern investigations focused on Nikumororo Island. Researchers analyzed bones found there in 1940, previously thought to belong to an unknown castaway. Using contemporary forensic methods, scientists determined the remains matched Amelia's approximate size and age. While absolute proof remained elusive, it was enough to fuel imaginations worldwide. Even photographs from distant archives were re-examined. Faded images of Pacific islands, coastal villages, and mysterious figures sparked debates. Could these have captured Amelia and Fred after their disappearance? Every new discovery, no matter how small, seemed to whisper, the story is not over. But the true legacy of Amelia Earhart is not just in the mystery of her last flight. It's in her courage, her audacity, and her refusal to accept limits. She inspired generations of pilots, explorers, and dreamers. Women followed in her wake, breaking barriers in aviation, science, and beyond. Schools, scholarships, and museums commemorate her life. Books, films, and documentaries keep her story alive. And in every child who looks up at the sky and dreams, Amelia Earhart's spirit soars.
Some mysteries are meant to endure. Some questions remain unanswered. But in the vast expanse between the clouds and the ocean, Amelia Earhart flies on, a reminder that courage can outlive even the greatest of unknowns. Her final flight may be shrouded in mystery, but her life remains a beacon, a story of adventure, inspiration, and the relentless pursuit of dreams that refuses to be forgotten. The sky was her home, and no ocean, no matter how vast, could ever contain her spirit.